Hello and welcome to the Creators Guild podcast. I'm Chris Howell and with me,
Jared Lovelady.
and we are here to talk about all things creative. And again, we're going to start as usual with another chapter from A Flight from Shadows, which, again, if you don't have your copy, you can go find it on Amazon. You can get to Amazon if you go to our website at duradimBooks.com and also go there and check out what we're doing. It's still under construction. There's still a bunch of stuff we want to add, but hey, full-time jobs, whatnot, things go the way they go. But go check it out. Let us know what you think. Also, we're going to have a guest. Miller Thomas is back with us today, and so he'll be joining us here in a little bit. Without further ado, A Flight from Shadows. Chapter 24, A Few Drops, Cycle of Ryo, Year 12182. He would never be considered a poor, lost soul, someone who merited our kindness. Yet even he played a role in her shaping. Chronicles of a Queen, Arid Fredoc. The low-lying sun set fire to the woolly clouds, sending orange flames that faded into pink cinders across the sky. It was later in the day than he had expected to arrive at the manor house, but it had taken Vilnor longer than expected to settle his crew and the prisoners they were transporting. It was not a bad life, being a traveling warden, but it had its frustrations. It took effort to maintain order when dealing with criminals, and some among this bunch were more rowdy than usual. He had finally gotten them turned over to the magistrate in the Tradoc prison for the night, before finding a room at the Three Crowns Inn. They had rooms available for him and his men at the prison, but Vilnor preferred the inn. He and Garish, the innkeeper, were old friends, and Garish always gave a steep discount on a room for the night. He smiled, waving to the soldiers, who stood as sentinels, as he directed the horse pulling his small wagon through the archway of the manor house grounds, bringing it to a stop just under the arch. "Ho, warden," one of them said, ushering him forward with a wave of his hand. "Good spirits to you this evening." "And you," Vilnor replied, "and even better spirits when I get back to the inn." "Have one for me," the soldier said with a grin. "I'm on watch the next few nights, so there'll be a dry spell for me till then." "I'll have a double, with a toast to your good name, Alden." He knew most of the soldiers and house guards of House Umari, and would occasionally visit the barracks with a cask of mead or a stout ale to share with them. It was good practice to have friends among those who might be called upon to save your life if the need arose. "You're a bit late in the day, aren't you?" asked Brand, the other guard, as he walked forward to pat Vilnor's horse on the neck. "I would think you'd be settled in and getting ready for dinner by now." "And I would be doing precisely that, if I didn't need to see Maris about losing to me in a game of pitch. The day got away from me, and I'll be leaving the day after tomorrow. I wanted to make sure he had the opportunity to play a round or two, while I'm here." "I believe he is still in the jail," Alden said, "but he does keep odd hours at times. You may have ridden out only to find his office empty." "Oh, I'm not too concerned," Vilna replied. "If he is away, I'll wait. And if that takes too long, I'll leave him a note. He beat me last time, and I'd very much like to regain the upper hand." "I never could get myself to play pitch," Alden said. "I like to throw dice or play a hand at Queen's Crown or deuces. Those are the games soldiers and house guards play. Pitch takes too much work to learn. Besides, I've heard that a single game can take hours, or even days. Soldiers don't have time for games like that." "It's difficult to find someone who will play it," Vilnor said. "I have my own board and chits that I carry with me when I travel. I'm glad Maris likes to play. He's a worthy opponent. It's no good if you can't be challenged." "We'll take your word for it," Brand said, giving Alden a knowing look. "You'd better go find him if you want to get through a round before sunrise tomorrow." "Indeed," Vilnor said with a chuckle. "The night will be gone before we know it. I'll see you on the way out, hopefully with Maris in tow. If he happens by before I see you again, please send him my way, if you would." "Certainly," Alden said, as he and Brand stepped away from the horse. Vilnor shook the reins and clicked, stirring the horse into motion. He guided the wagon past the parade grounds and the state house to the long stone-paved path that led to the front of the jail. The windows were lit, and he strode through the front door with a boisterous, "Hello, all! I've come to again claim victory." The greeting was wasted, as there was no clerk at the desk, and no one entered the room through Maris's open door. "Hello, Maris, are you there?" he called, striding to the office door, peering inside. The room was indeed empty, and Vilnor entered, going to the jailer's desk, pulling open a drawer to retrieve a set of keys. It was actually to his good fortune that Maris was away. It would give him a chance to spy out the real reason for his visit, which involved the crazy little man called Teth in the cells below the jail. He could have sent a note to Maris from the inn. It would have done the job just as effectively as a personal invitation from Vilnor. Oh, he wanted to claim victory and pitch against Maris, and in truth, a victory against the jailer was nearly as important to him as the other job he had been sent to do. But that wasn't what was being paid for. With the keys, Vilnor had access to every door in the jail and dungeon below. The fact that they were in the drawer told him that Maris would not be away long. He would never leave them here for an extended period of time where just anyone could take them. The jailer was meticulous and kept things neat and tidy. He didn't like it when others interfered with his management of the jail, but he trusted Vilnor and would not mind his friend exploring, even in the dungeons, so long as he didn't disturb anything. Vilnor moved quickly through the jail, past the few cells on the main floor, and opened a heavy door at the back of the cells. He passed through 2 more doors before finally reaching a small room with stone walls. It appeared to be a sort of storage area, with a few small barrels and a burlap sack hanging on the wall, but a special, overly large key, inserted into a small crack in the mortar between 2 stones, allowed Vilnor to open the wall that was the entrance to the dungeon. It had been years ago when Maris had shown him how to open it using the special key. Once pointed out, the door was easy to locate, but without being shown or looking for it, it would pass for an ordinary wall. The air from the dungeons below was cool and clean. Having visited with other prisoners and dungeons, he was still surprised to find how neat and tidy Maris kept things. When Vilnor had asked Maris why he went to such lengths, the jailer had replied, "The dungeons are for special prisoners. They are kept there either as a source of information or to languish for the rest of their lives in solitude. It would not do to have them contract an infection due to an unclean environment and expire early. While their stay should not be comfortable, anything that happens to them should be by intention, not to neglect." He had said it so matter-of-factly, as though anyone in his position would do the same. Vilnor chuckled to himself as he considered it. Keeping a dungeon clean and pleasant-smelling. Only Maris would do such a thing. No sounds emanated from the dimness below. There would be few, if any, prisoners besides Teth. Some provinces held only political prisoners and dissidents for decades, but House Umari was known for its swift execution of sentences, be that figurative or literal. He quickly descended the stairs, revealed by the opening to the narrow, low-ceilinged hallway of the dungeon. 2 small oil lamps created dim pools of yellow light in the oppressive darkness. Adding a minuscule glow was a seam of light emanating from beneath the first door at the bottom. Moving to the door, he tried the handle, relieved that he would not have to fumble with keys when the door swung inward. To his surprise, an occupant lay on a slatted table in the center of the room, his hands and ankles bound by leather straps, and his neck secured by a wide collar. This was an interrogation room, not a cell, and Maris was not a questioner, only the jailer. Someone must have been questioning the man recently, or perhaps he was being kept in this room for the duration of his interrogations. Either way, he had located Teth, and would take advantage of his success. He recognized the man from the description he'd been given. Teth appeared to be asleep, or perhaps unconscious. Inspecting him closely, Vilnor shivered at what he found. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. The remaining fingernails were surrounded by swollen purple flesh, and every joint on the hand appeared to be pulled out of socket. He had no other injuries on his body, and appeared to be healthy, though his face looked as though at some point in the past it had been smashed. Vilnor stepped away from the unconscious form and checked the pouch at his belt. He removed a small cup of wax and carefully inspected it to make sure it had not cracked or broken before returning it. Encased in the wax was a piece of aged rotiger root. When fresh, the root was a sweet, almost honey-like taste to it, and could be added to tea as it steeped to sweeten it. If too much was used, it would cause an upset stomach, so it was used sparingly. But in a pinch it would do when honey was not available. If the root was harvested from a young rotiger bush before the first time the plant went to seed, it had another, more sinister use. The heart of the root could be cut out and soaked in cool water for 3 days. It must then be immediately encased in wax and aged in a cool, dry environment. As it aged, the once sweet flavor dissipated until finally it became void of all taste and smell. It took nearly 50 years to age properly, and the Rodiger bush was very rare, with seeds that were difficult to propagate. On top of that, the heart of the young bush was roughly the size of a thumbnail. For these reasons, it was extremely difficult to come by in this form. A successful aging of the heart, however, would make the smallest piece into a deadly poison. Cracking the wax open would expose the aged root, which could be squeezed to obtain a few remaining drops of moisture. These few drops, in an open cut or sore, or if swallowed with food or drink, would kill an adult in less than 2 days. Once exposed from the wax, the drops must be collected in a matter of moments. After that, the root would lose its toxicity and be worthless. The drops could be rubbed into a spoon or a cup, or dripped onto a knife the victim would be cut with. The moisture would dry clear, becoming undetectable. The person to whom the poison was administered would appear to have contracted the wasting sickness, the deadly illness that could be found throughout the realms of Duradim. Their bodies after death withered quickly, like a grape in the sun drying into a raisin. Vilnor didn't know what information Teth had supplied his inquisitors thus far, but someone wanted to make sure no more information was shared, and that Teth's death appeared to be from natural causes, not by incompetence or maltreatment. He looked about and found a small table near the wall. On it lay a leather roll with delicate instruments used for extracting information. All he needed do was rub the drops collected from the aged Rodiger root onto one of the utensils used by the questioners, and his job would be complete. There were too many. He did not have enough of the Rodiger root to apply to all the instruments. He would need to be selective. He leaned close, inspecting the various blades and needles. Which one would be most likely? They were all clean, with no signs of one being used more than the others. He selected a small bladed instrument with a needle-like tip. They would have used something such as this on Teth's fingertips. He quickly walked back to Teth, examining his fingers closely, trying to compare the cuts to the instrument. He stopped in his inspection and stood, shaking his head. He was an idiot. There was no need to apply the poison to one of the tools. The poison could simply be squeezed directly into the cuts already inflicted on the man's hand, or even into his mouth as he lay there unconscious. Why had he not thought of that first? The answer was simple. He was no assassin. He was a warden. At another time in his life, he had been a soldier and fought in skirmishes with neighboring provinces. Men died in those skirmishes, and he had been involved in some of those deaths. But he had never done anything like this. It was unfamiliar territory, and he hoped it would not become familiar ground. Removing the pouch from his belt, he began to open it to retrieve the wax with the Rodiger root. A sound coming up from outside the door stopped his hands. He quickly put the pouch away and moved to the door, where he stopped and listened. The sound came again, and this time he heard it clearly. "Vilnor, are you down there?" It was Maris. "I'm here, Maris," he replied as he left the room and closed the door before heading back to the stairs. Maris stood at the top, silhouetted by the light coming through the opening. "You know I do not like it when you go into my dungeon," Maris said flatly, his brow furrowed. "You don't like it when anyone goes into your dungeon, Maris, and you've yet to throw me out for doing it. Will today be a first?" Maris wagged a finger at Vilnor. He looked a bit annoyed. "I should do just that." He scowled quickly. His scowl quickly changed to amusement. "But then I would have no one to almost challenge me at pitch." Vilnor laughed. "Almost? I've won against you more times than I care to count. Only when I'm feeling generous and can afford to win again without scaring you off." "Oh, I see how it's going to be," Vilnor said, offering a rueful grin. "Should we double our wager for tonight's game? I'm assuming you'll come have a drink with me and play around." "Of course. I look forward to teaching you yet another lesson in humility, but first I need to wrap up here." He gestured down into the dungeon. "I'm sure you saw my most recent occupant. He'll need to be fed and allowed to relieve himself before I can go." A thought popped into Vilnor's head. He could still accomplish what he came here to do, and help Maris along more quickly. "Why don't you let me help you? I could fetch his food if it's ready." Maris paused, rubbing his chin. "Very well. 2 would move things along more quickly, and I would enjoy a nice glass of brandy. His tray is laid out. The small pot has some soup, and just needs ladled into his bowl. If you'll fetch it, I'll get him up and ready to eat." He paused, and his face took on an odd, almost concerned expression. "I have to watch this one. He's a bit of an odd duck. I can't leave his meal with him. I don't know that he'd do any harm to himself. but I think he's more intelligent than he appears. Probably even more intelligent than he himself knows. It's as though the smart part of him, the part that's kept him alive and moving, is hidden behind a mask of a sadistic child. Only the child doesn't know it's just a mask. The quicker I can get out of his company, the better. Scares you a bit, does he? Vilnor meant it as a joke, but Maris surprised him. A bit, yes. Not that I'm worried that he'll do anything. He's kept secure. He just gives me an odd feeling, like being watched by a crazed animal in a cage, one that can never be tamed. You know, if the bars were gone, it would rip your throat out. Not because it is hungry, but simply because you're there. Now you're giving me the willies, Vilnor responded, looking over his shoulder through the open door. I'll go get the food. He gave an exaggerated shiver and headed toward the front of the jail. It took only a few minutes to get the soup, open the wax, and squeeze in the poison. Soon he was on his way back to the dungeon. A stroke of luck, after all. Teth would eat the soup, and everything would move along as planned. What's more, there would be plenty of time for the game of pitch. If he could convince Maris to ride in the wagon with him, perhaps he could needle the man into revealing what his strategy would be for their game that evening. Pitch began long before pieces were placed on the board, after all. He descended the stairs once more, tray of food in hand. This time the light spilled into the narrow hallway from the open door where Teth was bound. Dinner has arrived, Vilnor declared as he entered the room. He stopped. The tray of soup clattered to the stone floor as his mind reeled. He could not comprehend what he was seeing. The slatted table where Teth had been was now empty. Blood painted the room, and Maris lay on the floor, his body covered in deep slashes, his arms twisted and bent at the wrong locations. His panic gave way to a single thought. Where is Teth? A searing pain flared in the small of his back, and he cried out as his legs gave way beneath him. Well, this is a treat, came an odd voice from behind him. He tried to crawl away from the voice, but his legs wouldn't work. Looking over his shoulder, he saw Teth looming in the doorway. His left hand was cradled to his chest, the swollen fingertips visible and angry-looking. He was spattered in blood, as if it had been sprayed from a wineskin, and a lopsided grin split his deformed face. Please, Vilnor pleaded, as the strange little man slunk forward. I don't have much time, I'm sure, Teth said as he bent over Vilnor. And I don't have my toys, but I'm sure this will help you sing. Holding up his hand, a dreamy look entered his eyes. Teth waved it back and forth. The light reflected wetly off a needle-shaped blade. Vilnor's mind raced. He realized what he had done. When he had heard Maris call, he had mindlessly laid the instrument down on the table where Teth had been restrained. I'm sorry, Maris, he said in a whisper as he tried feebly to pull himself away. I'm sorry I was such an idiot. A kick from Teth rolled him onto his back. He tried to push the other man away, but the blade slashed, slicing through his pinky, severing it cleanly. The needle-like blade slashed again. He cried out at the searing pain. I like to hear them sing, Teth said, as the blade again found flesh. The last thing Vilnor heard was the sound of his own screams echoing off the cold stone walls. Dun dun dun! So, hopefully you enjoyed that chapter. And we're going to be joined by Miller Thomas in just a minute. See you then. So we are back with Miller Thomas. Miller, you were on with us episode 2, right?
Yes.
And when you were here before, we talked about you have your the Wolf Hunter series, and then your What Lies Beneath Peaceful Valley. And we talked a little bit about you're still 3 books planned in the Wolf Hunter series.
Yes.
And when we talked before, you had gotten through most of book 2 and part of book 3, and then you came back and said, I need to make all this jive. And so you were rewriting and editing and whatnot. How's that going?
Pretty much in the same stage. Yeah, with adding the 3rd child, she's about 1.5, a little over. Adding that and just life in general, it gets kind of busy and hard to work that all in. So
yeah,
that's how it goes.
Yeah, that was when Timothy McGowan was on, and he had gotten with his Arcane Knight series, things had taken off enough to where he moved to the middle of nowhere specifically so that he could write, and he was like, "This is what I do now," and I'm like, "That's what I want."
No
So,
feeling.
Yeah, because we don't know anything about rewrites and time
oh,
and
Yeah.
ridiculous. Now with yours, are you doing like are you is book two all the way? Has book two been like you've put the end on it once already?
Yes. Book 2 is in. I completed, I would say, second draft. I went through and then went through again,
Mm-hmm.
and then because of certain things with that book, where it's like, oh, I wish I could go a certain direction, but I can't because of things that happened in book 1.
Yeah.
I was like, well, if I'm gonna finish this out, I need to not go the finish it completely, so I can still do some edits and change some things around. So that one at least is done. The other one has just been kind of a struggle. In fact, here just recently, I thought maybe I'm coming at it at a wrong angle with the character that I was wanting to use. So sometimes that's the thing is once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
But
Well, unless while you were saying that, I just had the thought. What if, hear me out on this. What if, I mean, you're dealing with vampires and that's kind of, there's magical elements that go along with that world. Your main character figures out a way to use magic to retcon their own story.
oh no,
Not really time travel, but to be able to be like, no, this is like in the movie Clue, we're like, here's how it could have happened. Or maybe this is how, but here's how it really happened. Like do a little bit of that.
What is kind of ironic is because the style that I wrote it in, which is first person present tense, was very different.
Yeah.
Because everything is the main character's perspective of what they're actually experiencing. I could, not that I plan
Like
to.
if they don't know.
Yeah, if they don't know, or they just take what they're told, it doesn't mean that's absolutely 100% fact.
Yeah.
Um,
Them in their present state, oh, they are the unreliable narrator.
could be, yes.
So what about you had talked about needing to make some changes because of the direction you wanted to go, not just in book two, but in book three. Do you know? I don't remember if we asked you before. Do you know, like, here's how it's all going to wrap up and end? Or are you still like, well, I could go one of these many ways?
I think
We have a friend coming. Come here, Molly. You get to be on the show. Oh, nope. You got to go see Miller. Okay. Well, we have another guest. This is Molly. As long as she doesn't bark,
hello, Molly.
you just get to hear her tapping toes when she walks around on the hardwood.
what if I'm sitting in her favorite chair, perhaps?
No, I think she just, if there's a lap, she wants to sit on it. So. But anyway, sorry, we were the ending and the directions, potential directions you might want to go in.
There's because of the style that I write, again, the style that I write, I'm what you would call a linear pantser. So I write as it comes, and I don't.
You don't jump ahead and
I don't jump ahead and that
be
kind
like,
of stuff.
I want to write this piece of the story because it just popped into my head.
Yes, I may make a mental note of that part, and so I'm going to work towards that. But really, as far as like having it all laid out, that's not the way that I write. But with there being multiple books, that can obviously lead to problems because if you forget,
Yeah.
oh, whoops, that was a big major part of the previous book, then you can get yourself in a corner. But when it comes to like, there's been times, especially like my first experience that was with What Lies Beneath Peaceful Valley, because with that, there was a scene that I thought I had in my mind it's going to work out this way at the end of it. But as I wrote, because of character interaction and the conversation, it went completely a different direction.
Yeah.
So, because that's how stories play out in my mind, I guess. So it's one of those things that I can think that something's going to happen at a particular point in time. I kind of have an idea of the ending and the direction, or at least the main conflict that's at the very end. But as far as how that wraps up, what ends up happening, it could be exactly like what you said. Some of my ideas is it complete it completely retconned the whole thing. That all of this was one timeline, but
Yeah.
yet now the timeline is completely different. Maybe that was a previous manifestation of the way the Earth was,
Yeah.
and now it's completely different. So it's
Yeah. Well, since you're writing from a different first-person perspective, have you seen the movie uh, Vantage Point with Dennis Quaid? Is it Dennis Quaid and Sigourney Weaver?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
And
hmm,
I don't remember who. Anyway, Dennis Quaid, but it's there's there's a bomb that goes off in at this political speech in Europe somewhere. So I can't remember where they're at, but anyway, it's this this big open area with buildings all the way around it, like a big forum area, and there's a crowd, people up on stage, and an assassination attempt, and then a bomb goes off, and it shows the story from Dennis Quaid's perspective and Sigourney Weaver's perspective and the shooter's perspective and this other and it goes back and it starts from the beginning of the day, and it does that like 4 times through the whole movie. So
yeah,
each piece gets like 15 to 25 minutes, but it's all the different perspectives. And you're like, wait a minute, that didn't happen that way. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter because this is from this person's perspective. They didn't know what the other people over here were doing. We know.
yeah,
Or a different version of that is Hoodwinked,
yeah,
Little Red Riding Hood.
yeah. Very, and in a way, that is portrayed, even though in my, because I'm trying to keep the same way that I go through it. But because of my main character Danny, because of his perspectives, that kind of what I did never liked about supernatural type books and like vampires is they all believe the same thing,
Yeah,
and they all have this. Well, I know the real thing, the real whatever, and they all agree.
yeah,
And then everybody automatically agrees with, or at least understands they know better than everybody else. Now they don't approve of their methods or what they're trying to accomplish, obviously, but they don't like, but they accept that as being fact. Where in my story, different immortals view what their purpose is, what right and wrong is, completely differently.
yeah,
So that's part of that whole, like what you said, that that's a different perspective, and they are seeing different things, and that's when I think is a real character that isn't just put in to advance a plot. These are actually living characters within a world because they all have their different aspirations and their different perspectives and what they think is good and bad, and that's kind of the situation of the whole thing is the character who's eventually revealed, who feels like he's the hero, is part of what's causing the destruction of the world
yeah,
because of his trying to do what he views as the right thing.
yeah,
And it's so that's part of that whole perspective. So much is perspective of
yeah,
what's good, what's bad.
yeah. Well, thinking about from a like the perspective, the retcon, the different, how would you change something when you have a story, part of your story that already exists? Um, One of the thoughts that I just had was look at people that study history, like history.
Yeah.
I think that's something with from a reader's perspective, and I'm guilty of it. Being reading, Jared knows. Do I ever when we're watching? We grew up watching TV shows, movies, and stuff like that, and I'm like, that couldn't have happened that way. I don't ever do that, right?
No, never.
But I think we get it, and I think people that are like hardcore fans of specific reading genres or authors or whatever get into this mindset of no, history exists in this way because I read in book one and it said this,
Mm.
and I'm like, are you a student of actual history? That go back to the 1990s. They weren't very long ago. and look at the conflicts that people
They
argue.
were 30 years ago.
What?
They were 30 years
Hey,
ago.
shut up. Yes. On the grand scheme of things, we're not talking about, you know, writings and controversy around Plato or Aristotle, or Socrates, or we're not talking about thousands of year old ancient tablet writings or papyrus scrolls where we're like, well, what did they actually mean? Are we interpreting? We're like, no. The hardest thing we have to interpret is what did they mean when they were like when they said radical dude? Was that good or bad or
And ironically, even with that, so even though the more ancient that it is because of the wear and tear of time, that some of those proofs of these people or these events or various things are gradually being lost to time, as much as we tried to preserve them. But that being said, there are some things that are ancient history that there's more evidence they happened than things like you said.
Yeah.
That, well, who says it? How many of us? Well, Google says it. I looked it up and there's some article somewhere, or Wikipedia said it. It's like, and people use that when it's like, if you ever did college research papers, that is not credible information. You cannot use Wikipedia as your source, because again,
just a sidetrack here, Wikipedia started out as like, this is just people's opinions and garbage. And then it got better with like, hey, this is actual sourced, multiple checked information. And then it went back to, no.
yeah.
Like, we're going to turn this back around and go back the other direction. We're going to take it back to garbage.
And then it's funny because, so what would make it more credible? You bring that up as one of the things I was wanting to talk about was with people that love something.
Yeah.
Love video games or movies or whatever else it might be, that they're creative people that because they love something, that's with fan fiction and all that kind of stuff. And then with video games, PC, and they make mods so this better reflects, a version of this. Now there's people that do it that don't do it in a healthy way, that it just makes it super easy or whatever. But some of them, it's like, these are the people that you need to get for your game development because they actually love this universe.
Yeah.
They actually love these characters, and they are able to do things that you weren't able to do when they've done it out of just love. They haven't made any money off of it. And even with Wikipedia, that idea of, well, there's people that actually want there to be good information. They want to use proper sourcing. They actually care about whatever the subject.
Yeah.
And so that's the good idea or the best case scenario of how crowdsourced information would be.
Yeah.
But then you have the opposite that gets involved, which is people that are just trying to push maybe their view of things to eliminate other views.
Yeah.
It goes back to, when people talk about diversity, well, what's diverse, right? Yeah. It's not the same. It's not everybody agrees. That's the whole issue that we have. I think a lot of times in society is we should be able to disagree, but yet be civil with each other and see merit where there is merit. And then just as like, I don't know how many times, if you pay attention to any of the modern, like big game things, big shows, big movies, that if they don't do well, there's this blame the audience. Oh, they're a this and a this and a that and a this and that. And it's like, that is completely the opposite. Again, it's like all of us, when you make something, now we can love, we love, our stories and our characters and various things. But if we're wanting to sell a book, we're making a product.
Yeah.
And to blame someone, if they come and they tell us, hey, I didn't like such and such, it's like, well, we can accept that. Maybe this was the genre for them. That's fine. But to be all defensive and like, how dare you, and I'm a this and that, because that's the point. It's like, this is for their enjoyment. Fiction is for the enjoyment of the reader, not for our, in my opinion, our building up our ego. And I think
there's a little bit of that, though.
There is, yeah, there is. And that's part of, again, a person's personal character. And it doesn't mean, again, there's all kinds of people and, that you cannot see it that way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that that person is somehow horrible and wrong because they wanted again, especially if it's a very popular franchise or whatever, or when they can become more attached to the character than maybe you were, because some people, they write things and it's a means of making an income. They have no love for their character. But usually you can tell that with writing. But anyway, but there's some people that really care about that writing and that character, and for you to like you said, retcon, if it was something that was painful or hurtful or something that could really upset someone.
Yeah. Well, it's like, we've talked about Star Wars on, and what kicked off Jared and I writing our books series to begin with was, let's do some Star Wars fan fiction stuff, because we really cared about Star Wars.
Yep.
And then episodes 1, 2, and 3 came along and kicked us in the junk. And we're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
And, going back, I can watch them now and be like, that's okay. But in Star Wars, when they created episodes 1, 2, and 3, I was like, is there a character in the existence of cinema that is less annoying and hated than Jar Jar Binks? I'm like, you put this character as like one of the leading characters throughout an entire movie, to where, like, while you're watching it in the theater, like, if I had a gun and could shoot him through the screen, But it's interesting because you go back and look at the way those films. I don't know if it was writing. I don't know if it was directing. I don't know what it was. I look at, was it Hayden Christensen? Is that the guy that plays Anakin?
Mm.
And I'm like, I really, by the time those movies were done, I'm like, I do not like, I don't want to watch anything with Hayden Christensen in it, ever. Because, like, Darth Vader was a bad guy. But everybody loved Darth Vader as a bad guy forever, since, 1977?
Yeah.
Like, yes, we recognize he's the bad guy, but also he's like this crazy awesome bad guy that everybody loves. And now we're going to say, well, where did that bad guy come from? Hayden freaking Christensen? And his character is like, yeah, the dialogue wasn't the best. But I'm like, Liam Neeson pulled it off okay. And Ewan McGregor pulled it off. Who was telling Hayden Christensen, okay, I want you to get upset, but when you get upset, instead of sounding arrogant and pompous, like you should be the one to form your own destiny, I want you to sound like a whiny baby. Every single time you talk, I want you to complain and sound like a baby, going, I hate sand. It's so rough and against Anthony. Or Obi-Wan. He just doesn't recognize how good I am. I'm like, oh my God. Idiot. You could have said the exact same line, but the director should have been going, Hayden, okay, say the same thing. Don't sound like a baby when you say it. But, that, I wonder, okay, George Lucas, he obviously, or at least appeared to, just absolutely love the characters and the story he was creating in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Yeah.
But then there's a guy, I have no idea who this creator is, but I don't know if you've seen it, where there's somebody who went and put out a video of, this is the final lightsaber battle between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi that we deserved. And it is freaking awesome. And I'm like, they wouldn't even need to edit anything. They could just because they put it in with actual scenes every time it shows Obi-Wan and Vader fighting, but it's more drawn out, more dramatic, and they're actual, instead of just, let's tap the tips of these swords together, because we got to be careful, because we don't want to break them.
Yeah.
because we only have one on our budget,
Yeah.
or whatever the case. So he took actual clips and then did CGI and made this battle between, like, that's somebody who they did a retcon, they loved the characters.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what would have happened if whoever did that scene had come up with and directed episodes 1, 2, and 3 instead of the people that did?
Now you
Yeah.
have to give them credit though. They went back and kind of retconned with Obi-Wan Kenobi, or with Kenobi, the series, and with Ahsoka. And they really redeemed a lot of things in those.
Yeah, but that was what's his name? The guy that directed all those.
Yeah, I can't think of his name at the moment, but yeah, no, it wasn't Lucas. It was
Yeah.
it was somebody else.
It was somebody else who was like, I love Star Wars, and we need to fix this garbage. We need to try to reel this back out of the trash can and clean it up a little bit. Now, anyway, we're not here to talk about Star Wars. That was just to make a point yeah, I wonder between Lucas is the original creator of this whole world and all this futuristic sci-fi, the whole idea of like the used future. I don't know if he created it, but he did a pretty dang good job of making it feel real in that setting. And then like coming out with a movie that doesn't have any leading credits or anything, and just nope, we are coming in with a movie. Like, I love that. Love that he did that. So what happened between then and when episode 1 came out versus, like I said, that guy who did a retcon and just totally made this awesome scene that you could literally clip it, and as it is right now on YouTube, you could go clip that and just stick it into Star Wars, the episode 4, and you'd be like, I love this movie just because of that scene.
I think there's some, when people like, so to think of all they went through for the production of the original Star Wars series, and seeing, even though they did update those later when they had more technology, but the tricks that they used, like making there be like a mess up in the film so it looked like a speeder, so you couldn't see the wheels, so it looked like it was levitating. It was just like a grainy whatever underneath it.
Yeah.
But it's the artistry of trying to capture people's imagination.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is eventually that becomes lost, well, especially, the whole Disney acquisition, is this is a moneymaker. What's kind of funny is we work in something kind of similar, where there was a company that was bought by another company, and the other company says, make money.
Yeah.
Because that's your job, is to make money. And then they say, well, okay. And you see that there's this, weird change of, like, with that, it's like, well,
I think it's not because everybody who's like, I want to make money. I want my books to sell. So go buy my book. Like, give me money. But the difference, I think it's when Disney stepped in, when other companies step in, it's not just, hey, make money. It's make money faster.
yeah.
Right now.
Or,
not, hey, you're not making as much money now, but this potential, this is going to keep growing and growing, and then it's going to be stable and strong and able to withstand, and maybe it'll make a lot of money, but it'll still be profitable. Versus, we don't want just profitable, mega profits now. Who cares what happens to the future? We're worried about tomorrow, not next year.
Yeah. And I think also with, like, so from our perspective, where it's, that came out, the 1, 2, and 3 was probably around when I was more interested in movies or whatever. But it's interesting that I think from our perspective, where we're at in life, there's things that we've seen that we enjoy, and then there's things that are more modern, and sometimes the more modern things, they don't have the respect that they should have for things that have come before.
Yeah.
And a perfect example of it is like Ready Player One, in my opinion, from the book to the movie. The movie would have been like made by the Sixers. The
Yes.
movie was let's appeal to everyone,
Yeah.
where the point of the book was the 80s and the
The
pop culture of the
nostalgia
time,
and
the
everything.
nostalgia, but it was younger people having a respect for the nostalgia of those who went before.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is you can have something new, but it's this I have to see myself in whatever this movie is for me to enjoy it. I think that's entirely in some ways what's being lost in fantasy is because they want I can't enjoy a fantasy unless I see like the big one that I've noticed for example was with D&D and them having elves and wheelchairs
Yeah.
mages and it's like you can have people okay it's like so heal doesn't heal fully so there's that argument of well okay you can grow a limb back but you can't fix so you can walk again but the other is why what about artificers and what about having some kind of like
Yeah.
spider thing that can walk or
What if
do
you're
it
like, I have a necromancer on my team and I necromance this skeleton to all he does is walk this person around. He's
yeah
like a mech suit skeleton.
yeah but why is it looking like something from 1995 I mean
Yeah.
come on it's like we even have better wheelchairs than that but that's the thing it's like it's some are like, well, I have to see myself of what I experience for me to enjoy this. It's like, then it's not fantasy. That's the whole purpose. It isn't being
Well,
exactly like you. And if you want to, sure, you can try it. But it's like, what's all this blowback of how dare people be like, I don't want to just see this and that and worry about, this person's whatever pronouns or whatever else it might be. It's like, tell a story. I mean,
Yeah.
get over
Well-
trying to, make modern problems on the screen because it goes back to that. I mean, it's like it's escapism. That's what it's always been, and
Yeah.
like with even with sports, like when we were going through World War II. That's why sports became a government thing. It's baseball, and why they had control over it is because people need something to get their mind off of every terrible thing. Finding that their loved ones have been killed possibly, and various other things. It's like it's an escape, but there's some in this world now that they can never escape apparently it's like
Yeah.
everything's some political agenda or something to be pushed instead of tell a story.
Well, and I think part of that is that that idea of every single thing that exists today has to be represented in everything that does exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, that's this ideological mindset that's being pushed by people that, if you talk to people in so there's a Deft Rock, if you're listening, you should be, a buddy of mine on X that so he came up, he's in a wheelchair, he's gone through, he just went through a surgery like 2 weeks ago, and then he's in the middle of recovering as of yesterday. He's back in the hospital because he got a urinary infection because of like having to be in bed and stuff like that, and he's trying to recover from that and not die from the surgery he just went through. And then he's going to have a brain surgery like supposed to like December, January timeframe again. And I'm like, multiple surgeries, he's in a wheelchair, he's deaf, he's all this stuff. And he puts out videos on X of, here's how I get in and out of my truck, people have asked me, here's how I drive, here's how I do stuff. And he jokes around about stuff all the time. And one of the things he said, he put out there, and he tagged Ryan Reynolds and he tagged Will Ferrell, I think, and a couple other comedians. And he's like, all right, here's a movie pitch. Ghost Rider. But the guy who becomes Ghost Rider was in a wheelchair when he was alive. And when he becomes Ghost Rider, he's still in a wheelchair. And it's called Ghost Rider Chariot of Fire. And I'm like, I love it. I'm like,
awesome.
Brock, you're awesome. This is amazing. But, he throws those things out there. But, talking to him, he's had people come after him on X. We'll be in a conversation and people come after him and be like, you can't say that. We need to represent this. You just don't understand. And he's like, I'm one of the most handicapped people on the planet. You know, like the only thing he, you know, right, he was able to get it. I don't know if he'll be able to get in and out of his truck ever again. You know, he doesn't have, like I said, no use of his legs. He has to have surgeries. You know, he goes a bunch of different stuff going on in his life, and he's deaf on top of it. You know, like so many different things. And he'll be like, "Are you kidding me? We don't like." He's like, "I don't need to see me in there. I just want something good." Now it can be a representation of me, but if it's not good, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what I think most of the population actually feels like. Is sure, are there people who want to try to put more representation in different stories? Sure, do that. Do whatever you want. But the whole point is make something that people want to be involved with and want to be a part of. I've seen a couple from the D&D world, even people that I know that play D&D that are in wheelchairs. They still play D&D, and they're like, I don't want my freaking character in D&D to be in a wheelchair. Are you kidding me? There's not ramps. You know, most of D&D takes place in some kind of medieval type world. And they're like, the DM's going to be like, okay.
Like my great nemesis, stairs.
Yeah. Or they're like, okay, there was a rock slide. And you have to take your wheelchair with you. All right, how do we do this? You know, there isn't a way, you know, there isn't a way to accommodate that in that world.
And that's, again, it goes to if it makes sense with the story. And I mean, there's a big deal with that. It's like, just tell a story again. It's like, I don't know, you remember the big controversy of the movie Dunkirk because there weren't enough people of color. It's like, it's England.
Yeah.
They just weren't there. And to do that and that's actual history, to do that is completely wrong, you know, because it just didn't happen. It's not that there's anything wrong, you know, with having people of color in a story. That's great. It's like there's
Well, look at Hamilton. People enjoy the play Hamilton because whoever wrote it wrote good music.
Yep.
Like they made a good story about, you know, like great. Awesome.
And even with that, it's like some of it, I think maybe it's because it's been done so much, and it becomes that's what's interesting is it becomes derivative.
Yeah.
Like even now with like say games or whatever, there is nothing wrong with female protagonists. They're very enjoyable, but then you're like, every game is a female protagonist now. That's all that they wanted, you know.
Yeah.
And so it becomes oversaturated. It's not that there's anything wrong or right about it. It's just when you oversaturate a market, and that's true of anything. That's true of books. That's true of movies. It's like when I've seen this so many times, there comes a point of, hey, maybe you need to back off of this or do it differently. Do it, you know, go a different direction, and that's okay. You know, that's the point. It's like because a consumer, that's why it's called a consumer. So they pick, and just like what you're talking about, like if I want to have a comedy, I want every movie out there to be a comedy, you know, or this kind of comedy. If it's a Seth Rogen comedy,
Yeah.
you know, I want something a little bit different, and that's the whole point. It's like, I can pick and choose, and I like this or I don't like this. And then, like what you said, it's like, well, how is it being portrayed? And a lot of times, there's even people that, you know, they don't want things forced, because then that's obvious. It's obvious you're sticking something in there that don't belong. And then, you know, people who maybe identify with that, it's like, I wouldn't be like that. You know, like if you're like somebody's way like over the top, well, I'm in charge, blah, 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 you know, and then, well, that's messed up. You know, it's like, I'm not like that. You know, it's like, or there again, I mean, it's just the way that you approach it. So much is just how you approach it. If you approach it heavy-handed, and then in part of that's the other thing, is if your producers or whatever are out here saying, this is a thing to stick a thumb in the eye of the people that I don't like. And then what do you know? The people that you don't like don't go and see it. And in the end, it wasn't really as many people as you thought.
Yeah.
And now we didn't make money. And they're like, well, how dare those people that I stuck a thumb in the eye don't come and see it? You know, it doesn't make any
It
sense.
would be like Napoleon Dynamite when he comes in and there sitting on the table is the time machine. And he takes the little thing and he puts it between his legs and then he's like, "Ugh," and it shocks the crap out of him. You know, and here comes Uncle Rico and he's like, yeah, I could have told you it doesn't work. You know, and if they're like, you're just a, you know, user, we're blaming the user on the fact that it shocked your balls. Has nothing to do with the fact that this isn't actually a time travel time machine.
They're like, you just didn't use it right. That's
No. Well, when was Alien made? It was like what,
79.
70? I was gonna say like 78, 79, right in that era.
Mm-hmm.
Right in that. I'm like, Alien. Everybody loves Ripley.
Mm-hmm.
Sigourney Weaver. I'm like, having watched Alien, watching the new movies. You know, you get to Prometheus and you get to Covenant and the different newer Alien movies, and they're entertaining to watch. But so far, like, nobody is Ripley.
Yeah.
Nobody is Sigourney Weaver. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure, like, there wasn't any kind of agenda. There was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, we're going to make this Alien movie, and Sigourney Weaver would be awesome in it. And she was.
Yeah.
And then they're like, now we're going to make Aliens. And then, you know, I like most of the, some people are like, Alien Resurrection, and then Alien, you know, they're getting a little off. I'm like, I like all of them. But, and I like Ripley, Sigourney Weaver, as playing Ripley, I'm like, ultimate badass.
Mm-hmm.
She's not super soldier. She's not, you know, all these things that she isn't. She's a scientist and she's good at what she does and she's able to figure out problems that other people just rush by and panic, and she's able to figure out how to save herself and the cat and the little girl. You know?
And it's one of those things, just like, yes, there is Superman, but every superhero is not Superman.
Yeah.
And the ability, it goes back to that what makes a compelling character in telling a story is not they're stronger than everybody, they're smarter than everybody, and they just immediately, you know, solve every problem and never have any issues. It's like the whole conflict, that's part of it. And it goes back to, you know, we can talk about, you know, that like women in history, that women generally didn't write the history books, but it's like all of human history has had male and female.
Yeah.
And as many men as there have been rulers, it's like, even going back to ancient, like I just listened to a kind of retelling or whatever of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about that. This guy said that women, you know, in this representation, he's like, that women are stronger than men, stronger than the king, because when the queen is upset with him, he could snap his fingers, have anything in the kingdom. He's like, what's wrong? What can I do for you? You know, that it's like, it's like that a woman who is clearly not nearly as strong as he is, you know, she can't click her fingers and he gets executed, but yet she knows how to use what she has to accomplish, you know, whatever her goal is.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, when they talk about, you know, they're like military things, various things, like, so women don't have the same skill set as men, in general, you know, we're talking about generalities, but they can accomplish so many things, and some things way better than men can. And so it's like this, don't tell a story like there's a particular series of books that I didn't like, because it was like, you're forcing this accomplishment, or this, you know, with a character. It didn't really matter if it was male or female. It's like they're being promoted, they're failing up all the time, and like they're they're making bad decisions and people getting killed, but it's like, well, and then at the end the commander's like, well, I made bad decisions too before, so I'll promote you anyway. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense. And that's the thing, like when it comes to, hey, not that it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
sadly, in reality, it does happen.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're telling a story, at least for me, and that's the thing. It's like it depends on the person, but to me, it's like this is just poor storytelling. It's I have a place that I want to go, and I didn't really find the right direction, or I just said some stuff, but it didn't really add up to what I wanted, so I just fudged it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing when it comes to like, and that's very common now that it's like you have to go through certain things to get there. Just like if you're going to be have physical prowess, you don't do that by sitting on your couch.
Yeah.
It's like there's a build up.
Unless you're a cat.
Yes, true. And then they claw. No matter how fat they are, they'll claw your face off if they decide to.
No, I think the like a basic way that I can describe that forcing character representation and forcing whatever it is into writing or storytelling of any kind is that there's a question asked frequently in the writing community where people will ask, what's your favorite type of storytelling or perspective on storytelling? Are you okay with head hopping? Do you prefer first person versus third person? And then I've never heard anybody say, well, what about second person? Do you like second person? But the reality is, I'm like, I've read some really good first person stories. I've read like one or two, because there aren't very many, like one or two things that are written in second person, and they're usually like short stories, or maybe it's even something interjected into a different perspective that were really well written and I enjoyed. I've also read really crappy third person writing. And I'm like, when people ask the question, what's the best writing style? I'm like, I don't think there is a best writing style. I think there might be some people that have a hard time getting in, just the way they think. They might have a hard time getting into, well, I don't know how to get into somebody's head from a third person perspective. Or sometimes I can get a little distracted by this first person perspective. But I think those are much fewer than what people actually broadly speaking would enjoy if the baseline was just make it a good story with compelling writing and invite me in. Then it does, like I've said, there's books that I've read that are first person and I'm like, it didn't ever even click in my brain that I'm like, oh, I'm reading in first person. I just started reading. And if it was a good story and it pulled me in, then I kept reading.
Yep.
And I think it's the same thing. Like male protagonist, female protagonist, person in a wheelchair, person who, whatever. Name whatever the thing is.
Yep. I
don't really care as long as it fits with the world that you've created and it's compelling storytelling. The problem is, I think a lot of stuff today, like you said, it's derivative. My first focus is I've got to make everything fit the way I want. And then, whatever story I can fit around that. And I'm like, yeah, but that's garbage. You come up with a pile of garbage when you do that.
Then I think, and there again, sometimes you forget not everyone maybe approaches things in the same way. But like I've read like male, where they say you have to be this, like now it's very interesting. Like when it came to characters that were gay, there was a time where that was considered to be good. Like Sean Penn, Harvey Milk, for you being a straight person portraying a gay person. Well, now, no, that's wrong. They need to be what they're portraying. It's like, but that's what acting is. You aren't what you're portraying.
Yeah.
You aren't that character. You're something different.
I can't actually fly and shoot laser beams out of my eyes.
Yes. And then in the same way, like the second book, the first book was from a male's perspective. The second book's from a female's perspective. Now, and because of the way that I approached it, and I've had various women read it and they enjoy it, that you have to be able to make realistic characters. There's male fantasy writers who write female characters that should not. They have no idea. Yeah. But then I've also seen where that probably get me a lot of hate, but like Mary Shelley, I don't think she wrote male characters very well. They are all like
They're all versions of Mary Shelley.
Yes, they're all versions of Mary Shelley. And the thing is, the worst probably of it is probably what you don't even sure, Dr. Frankenstein is who he is. But even the ship captain is brought to tears because of this man telling his sad story, that he doesn't even really know. It's like, the way that book is, in my opinion, is just she hadn't had a lot of life experience. She hadn't been around a lot of rough people, which is perfectly fine. But it goes to, hey, she wrote it and she was very groundbreaking for her time. And that's the thing. I think there's a lot of, I read many, classic British literature, but I think that's what it was. There was a sheltered way of life. They weren't around the rough people.
Yeah.
They intentionally, aristocracy, all that kind of stuff, they really didn't want to get out in the streets with people because it could even be dangerous for them.
Yeah.
Get robbed and everything else. And they looked at people that certain way. Well, I think, now it's better to have a broader idea of characters because many of us have lived a life where we deal with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And that was the way when I wrote my book that I wanted to approach it that way. If there's different echelons, so to speak, and they're not all the same. And that's what I enjoy myself. And I enjoy that when I watch a movie or a show or play a game. Like, I enjoy different cultures being represented, and not because, and that's a whole nother story.
Well, look at Robert Jordan created this huge elaborate world, and I would argue that the world of the Wheel of Time is one of the most broadly represented. Like, if there's a demographic or a culture that you're like, I want to see hints of this culture in a story. I don't care what culture it is. It's probably in the Wheel of Time somewhere, so broad. Also, in the Wheel of Time, and I agree with the sentiment that people are like, stop telling us about Egwene or Nynaeve tugging on her stupid braid. It's like every time she gets frustrated, she grabs her braid and pulls on her. And I'm like, okay, you've killed that one. Stop telling us. We're sick of hearing her, have somebody accidentally cut it off really early on, then she can't tug on her braid anymore.
I do, which it is funny from people that have read my book that I do like putting, or in conversation or whatever. But anyway, there's humor in various things, and it would be funny where it's like, and she did that thing that she always does.
Yeah.
In the book would just be funny, And you know what? The one. It's, I enjoy books with that that perspective, that sometimes, that's that thing that I always say. Okay. But anyway.
Well, it's been an interesting discussion so far. We probably ought to, we're coming, we don't want to go too long here, but for updates on you, for updates on what's coming out in the future, and where can people find that information for you?
It's, so they're all available. Also, your podcast has listings of authors, which should be on there. I need to get you some more links, but anyway. But yeah, it's available on Amazon, what's out there so far, and also the audiobook. I sometimes forget to mention that, but that's also out there.
And we're going to put up, so on our website, on DuridanBooks.com. Always name your website. So DuridanBooks.com, we're going to have some, we've got you listed on our site. We're going to have some author spotlight pages that we're not quite there yet, but let us know as things progress. And when, if you start getting into where you have dates where stuff's going to come out, we'll put that out there and people can go find you through our website as well.
That's good.
Okay. Well, it's been a fun, lively discussion. Miller, appreciate you coming by. And for everybody listening, appreciate you all being with us today and joining us once again. Till next time, go in good spirits. Thanks for listening to the Creators Guild podcast. Don't forget to get your copy of A Flight from Shadows, available on Amazon. While you're there, please rate it and give it a review. If you like the Creators Guild, please like and subscribe, and make sure to share it with your friends. Until next time, go in good spirits.